Cyber insurance policies can help cover the cost of a data or network security breach in two primary ways. These two primary ways could be termed as liability costs and direct costs. Now, there are some other ancillary coverages that we could talk about, but those are the main ones. When we talk about liability costs, it's just what you think of when you think of a typical liability insurance policy. If you do something and a third party says that what you did caused them harm or damages, they may make a claim against you, file a lawsuit against you, alleging that you owe them some sort of damages. The liability portion of a cyber policy for a construction company or anybody else is going to cover you for that allegation by a third party that a data or network security breach caused them damages. And so it will pay the defense costs associated with defending that claim, whether it's a lawsuit or some other type of claim, and it will pay the actual damages that are suffered by that third party or any settlement that you might make with that third party. Relatively straightforward. A primary example would be you lose the data of a client or customer, or it gets exposed, and the exposure of that data causes them damages. I gave an example earlier of an Australian secret intelligence agency whose confidential plans were exposed by a hacker. So if the fault, or if the construction company, for instance, were protecting that data and failed to protect it appropriately, that intelligence agency may make a claim against them saying, we had extra costs associated with this construction because this data was exposed. So we're making a claim against you for those costs. The cost to defend that claim and to pay those damages would be covered under that data and network security liability portion of an insurance policy. So that's relatively straightforward. Something that's relatively unique about a cyber insurance policy are those direct cost coverage. So when you have a network security incident or a data breach, you're going to have direct costs associated with responding to that breach. Those come in the form of forensic investigation. If it's a network security breach, you're going to have an IT forensic investigator come in and take a look and find out what happened, how it happened, when it happened, how extensive was it. And so that's going to cost money. And sometimes these direct costs, by the way, can be more expensive than the liability costs. In addition to that, you're going to want legal advice on how to respond to this breach. And this is not defending a claim. That comes under the liability portion that we talked about earlier. But you're going to need advice to navigate regulatory waters, to figure out how should I respond to the breach, who should I notify about the breach, what do I have to do to make sure that I'm protected now that I know I've had an incident or breach. So there's that cost. If you have personal data associated with the breach, you may want to offer some remediation to the individuals who were affected by the breach. For instance, you might offer them credit monitoring or identity monitoring. Probably not very many people listening out there haven't gotten a letter offering them credit monitoring, given all the breaches that we've had so far. So it's become fairly standard practice and procedure to offer that when we're talking about personal data that's been exposed. If it's a public breach, you may want to launch a public relations campaign to rehabilitate any reputation loss you've received because of the data breach. And there are a whole host of other small things that you might want to do or might need to do in response to a data security breach or a network security breach. All of those things cost money, but it's not a claim by a third party. So this is money that the company is spending directly responding to that breach. A cyber insurance policy can cover those direct costs. So those are the two major buckets. Now, as I said, there are some ancillary coverages that go along with a cybersecurity policy, and these can be chosen or not chosen. So it's like a modular policy where you choose and pick the kind of coverage that you think is most appropriate for you. So an example of an ancillary coverage is cyber extortion. We've heard a lot about ransomware these days. And so this coverage in a cyber insurance policy would cover you not only for responding to a cyber extortion event, but also would potentially pay the ransom if everybody thought that it was appropriate to pay that ransom. There's also regulatory coverage. More and more regulatory bodies have gotten involved in cybersecurity. 47 of the 50 states have data breach notification laws. You've got regulations for healthcare information under HIPAA. You've got the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which is financial information, and that's just to name a few. So if there is a data or network security breach, there may well be a regulatory investigation that goes along with that. And the cost of defending that regulatory investigation, and actually the cost of potentially paying the fines and penalties that are issued by that regulator, are covered under a regulatory portion of the data security or cyber insurance policy. There's also some other coverages that you can get. There's media coverage, which pays for media exposures or content exposures that might arise, especially out of online or electronic media. That's why it's sort of grouped in with the cyber policy. There can sometimes be some pre-breach remediation costs that can be covered by the policy. So there's a whole lot of small things that can be added that can help defer the cost of a data or network security breach for a company. There is some decent coverage for cyber events, but you have to be very careful. There are no two policies that are the same. This coverage is relatively new. We haven't had cyber insurance for more than maybe 10 or 15 years, and 10 or 15 years ago it was very basic. Only recently have we gotten some of these robust cyber insurance policies that some of which I have referred to in explaining what coverages are available. But keep in mind that no two policies are alike. They don't even use the same terminology. So some policy might call it data breach response. Some might call it crisis management. Some might call it notification. It's all the same thing, they just call it different things. So these policies are very different, and you have to be very careful about the type of policy that you buy and the coverages that you're getting and understand what those are to know that you've got your exposures covered.